How did a former anorexic learn to hunger for God? That's the topic that we're going to address today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager, and I have an amazing guest with me today. Her name is Emily Wierenga, and she's an award-winning author, a commissioned artist, and founder of the Lulu Tree, a nonprofit serving vulnerable families around the world. Welcome, Emily. I am so honored to have you on Flourish-Meant today.
Thank you for having me, Tina. It's a joy.
Emily, let's start with your incredible story of overcoming an eating disorder. Let's start with right there where you were when you were struggling and how you moved from that point of struggling toward seeking God.
Yeah, well, we're going all the way back. I'm 44 years old, so we're going back to when I was, 4, and I had just moved back from Africa to Canada. My parents were missionaries, and during my time in Africa with them, I don't remember much, but my mom tells me that I never spoke. I made sounds, but I was mostly observing. And they worked with Christian Blind Mission. We had, from all the photos, there's a lot of joy on our faces. There's a lot of growing food and planting food and bare feet on the ground, and a lot of colors and warmth and just siestas in the afternoon and spending time together. And coming back to North America, to the cold winter of North America. And my dad went to seminary, and there were just a lot of walls. A lot of walls were put up. There wasn't a lot of living outside like there was in Africa. There wasn't a lot of communal living. There wasn't a lot of warmth. And that bond that I had formed with my parents seemed to sever. And there was suddenly the pressure to perform as a pastor's daughter, as the oldest of 4 children. You kind of live in a glass house as a pastor's kid. There's a lot of expectation from outsiders and from insiders. And we didn't go to school. My mom homeschooled us, and so we were each other's best friends and only friends. And then when I was 7, a neighbor lady came over to visit my mom, and I just remember overhearing her, like she was looking at me, and she told my mom, what a big child you have. And it just really struck me to the core that big was bad. And that, combined with the pressures, combined with not having a close relationship with my parents anymore, just drove me to seek attention and affection in the wrong places. It caused me to desire a voice because there was so much control over us as children, as pastors' children. When I was 9 years old, I began to stop eating, and I found a voice in saying no, right, to the food. My mom would dish it up, and I could say no, and she, couldn't force me to eat. And that was such liberation for me for a time. And then it became a prison pretty quickly. So for 4 years, I was battling anorexia nervosa, but I had no idea that's what I was battling. My mom had not even allowed us to play with Barbie dolls because she was so scared of us getting an eating disorder. So it's ironic that the fears that we have that we can unintentionally instill in our children. And for 4 years, I was just not eating and getting thinner and thinner. And when I was 13, I was put in the hospital, and I was supposed to be entering grade 8 that day. And so I had actually stopped eating entirely 2 days before I entered the hospital. I had been told I would be going. I just stopped. I'm like, there's no more eating. I was 60 pounds, 5'9". I was skin and bones. You could see the braces through my cheeks. My hair was falling out. My nails were brittle. I was an old lady. I was dying. They drove me to the hospital, and the nurses were shocked because I was blue from hypothermia. And they were like, so apparently they told my mom, she should be dead. She is a miracle. And when my mom came into my room, my hospital room, I was there with my teddy bear, at 13 years old. And she told me that I should have died and that I was a miracle. That's when I believed, Tina. That's when I believed that I had a heavenly Father who loved me and who had never stopped connecting with me even after we moved back to Canada, and who had heard all my sounds, all my silent cries, even when I didn't have words for them. He hears all of it. And I'm not saying everything became perfect, but I did pick up my fork and began to eat that day. And went home and began to live a normal teenager life, dated and all those things. And but never really dealt with the root issues, especially with father issues, like dad issues on earth. And so, that came back to haunt me when I got married. It's a new authority figure in your life. I did relapse, and this time I knew what I was doing. And that's the bad part. I knew that I was choosing anorexia, and for 3 years I chose it over my husband. I drank like 12 cups of coffee a day. I only ate a bit of supper. I was in I had insomnia. I was on sleeping pills, drinking wine, just trying to numb the pain of like not knowing who I was anymore. And we were driving home one day, my husband and I was at the wheel, and we were fighting as had become usual, and I was yelling at him, and suddenly I began to turn into oncoming traffic. And he grabbed the wheel and he pulled us over, and I was sobbing, and he said, "Emily, I love you, but I can't do this anymore. You need to choose. You need to choose between me and food. Because if you choose food, I'm out." And it was like the choice in Jeremiah, where God says, choose the ancient way, like choose life or death. And he was giving me a choice between life and death. And obviously I chose him. And we moved to South Korea and started over. And I began to really deal with the issues that had caused my eating disorder long ago. And I actually ended up moving home and taking care of my mom who had brain cancer. And that really brought tremendous healing. God just brought me home. And through that, I was restored. So that was 20 years ago.
When you mention anorexic disorders, there may be people who are listening who've struggled with eating disorders or other mental health conditions. Let's talk for a moment about how it's important not to compare one anorexic to another anorexic's experience, or one person who's had crisis, mental health, family issues to another, and how we can still all relate to some of the same truths that you're presenting here.
Yeah, it's not a comparison. Unfortunately, that is often the root of disordered eating is comparison. So I can see why that would be an automatic reaction to someone's story, but you have to recognize that as one of the roots of the disease, right? So it's basically all disordered eating is the same. I would say it's all a cry for help. It's all a cry to be filled. That's all we're hungering for, is to be filled. Some of us look for it in overeating. Some of us look for it in over-exercising and justifying eating through over-exercising. Sometimes it's a form of restriction and then binging. It really doesn't matter. In the end, we're the same. We're daughters of Christ or sons of Christ that are looking to be filled by a Father who is faithful, by a Father who will never leave us nor forsake us, and who wants good for us. And so that's what I want to focus on today. If you really want healing, then you're going to have to force yourself to get past the comparison and see how we're all the same in that.
I want to zero in on part of your story that suggests that there's healing found in ministering to others. And you founded the Lulu Project. Talk about how blessing other people was so healing for you.
I think it started with my mom. It started with serving her. The greatest joy, honestly, was washing her feet and drinking tea with her while she had brain cancer. And I felt the love of God just fall on me, and fill me, like to overflowing. When you begin to serve one person, He will multiply that love and cause you to want to love more people. But you start with the one in front of you. You don't go jumping to Africa, Look at your neighbor, look at your child, whoever is suffering in front of you. That is who you're called to. And he will multiply that love. He will bless you for being faithful with a little. But I had to get the healing first. So it's like putting on your oxygen mask in an airplane before you can help someone else. I had to be filled with him first before I could pour out his love poured out of me for others. So I never planned to start the Lulu Tree Foundation. I went on a blogger's trip to Africa, saw people who were suffering. This is a place I had been when I was little, and it felt like I was going home and seeing my family mixing dirt with water to coat their babies' tummies so their babies wouldn't cry from hunger. And I'm like, how can I call myself a believer and not do something about this? This is what I'm called to do. We are called to feed the hungry. This is literally Jesus starving in front of me. And so it wasn't a choice. It was just a realization. This is the gospel. This is where it all comes together. That I really struggled with the church for many years, I think because of the hypocrisy in the North American church, and I didn't see the gospel being lived out. And when I went back to Africa, I tell people, I found God. I found him in the praise of a mother who was holding a baby who was a year old and looked like a newborn. And when I found out that baby that looked like a newborn was a year old, and she said, don't cry. God is still alive. And just blowing my concept of God, of what we think is, theology, just blowing it out of the water. We put God in a box, and here she is worshiping him while her baby's dying because she couldn't feed him.
Emily, I know that people want to support the Lulu Project and they want a copy of your incredible book. How can they connect with you to access those resources?
Yeah, they can just find me at emilytwierenga.com. So, it's a difficult last name, WIERENGA.com.
I know that all of you listening were encouraged and inspired by the story and the message and the inspiration and hope that Emily Wierenga has brought to you today. I know that you will want to go to her website, so I encourage you all to do that. And of course, I also hope that you will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.